live stream. Lest you're wondering where my jury is at on Alberta independence, you can read my sweatshirt. But tonight we're going to be talking about something called the New World Order. This is something that has come up in over in Europe in the Davos world, and also as our Prime Minister gallivants off to China, and our former Prime Minister shows up with his new pop star girlfriend in Davos. Um, and this is something that a lot of people don't understand. Why would our Prime Minister be cozying up to China? And what is Donald Trump talking about? This speech, if in case you didn't catch it, over at the World Economic Forum. His new world order is very different than the one that Mr. Carney's talking about. And so we thought it'd be great to have somebody on the show who knows a lot about these things. He's an American, but he's somebody who pays very close attention to what's going on in Canada as well as elsewhere in the world. He's written a book about Iran. He's written a book about China. And he's even got a new book out about the Ukraine war and all the geopolitical nuances that are flowing into that. And his name is Brandon Weichert. Thanks for being with us, Brandon. Brandon of the Weichert Report.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And unfortunately, I'm probably going to be closing that down soon because that site was the one of the first wave victims of the 2020 COVID censorship, and it's
Oh,
never fully recovered from the SEO
they caught
damage.
you, eh? You got some
Oh, I
shrapnel.
had I had guys on the ground in Wuhan who were reporting war controls, and the minute that article went live, I got like a million clicks. Now, mind you, this was like a little blog. I got like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I got good clicks for a
Mm-hmm.
blog about geopolitics, but
Yeah,
never like a million clicks. I got a million clicks in an hour,
yeah.
and they this within a day of that article going live about wartime controls being instituted in Wuhan, suddenly the whole website was just down and
Yeah.
never fully recovered.
Well, fortunately, you're a prolific writer. And
Well,
you're
thank you.
published everywhere, and you're constantly writing great books.
Thank you.
So they can't silence you.
No,
But
they can't. No, they can't.
yeah,
Luckily, the bosses like me for whatever reason. So
yeah,
the national interest is my primary haunt now. I'm a senior national security editor there, and
yeah,
believe it or not, there are a lot of liberals that I report to, and they really like me. So I'm very very
yeah. We
grateful.
like you too.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate, but you're not paying my bills. They are.
No, no, that's right. Well, before we dive in and pick Brandon's prodigious brain, just a few housekeeping matters. As you know, we have the book, Lies,
Mhm.
Laws, and Liberties. It's not flying off the shelves the way Brandon's books do, but it's out there. People are supporting it, and we're grateful for that. If you haven't seen the book and you want to check it out, it's available on Amazon and also Kindle. And it's a way that you can support the show. A lot of people don't realize this, but this is all funded. All this fun is funded by yours truly. And my wife she's a saint and she's very supportive. But sometimes she asks me the question, Leighton, is that little podcast TV show thing that you're doing, is it ever going to start to pay for itself? So if you want to help us bring this great content to you, that's one way that you can do it is by buying the book. Also, want to remind you, we've got an interview out right now. It's been out for about a week with Emerald Robinson of The Absolute Truth, and now she's running Lindell TV. And I think you'll find this interview really interesting. And she's doing a lot of great stuff with Lindell TV, so check that out. Also, we have a commentary out, The Quiet Revival, about the incredible growth of Christianity worldwide in young people. And so check that out as well. We have a new one coming out soon that tells the other side of the story. It's called Thrown to the Lions, and that's about global persecution of Christians. So there's sort of two sides to the story. We also have an interview coming out tomorrow with Dr. Shoshana Schendelman, who we interviewed with. Very, very interesting, brilliant lady, doctor and scientist. So we've introduced tonight's guest. We can dive in there, but before we go any further, I'm just going to throw it over to Michael. Michael can tell you about all the ways that you can support what we do
Mhm.
besides buying the book.
Yes. Well, good evening. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. We do appreciate that you're here. Please, my first request of of the support is to like and to share where you're watching. and we are trying to shift the lives over to the YouTubes, um, just to build up that audience there. And just a reminder that we've had some great numbers at YouTube, on YouTube, with Leighton's episodes. And in fact, the Faith Under Fire, we've got over 4,000 views on it. So thank you to those of you. There's definitely an appetite. That one does feature kind of the persecution that's going on in different locations in China.
Yeah.
So that persecution sometimes seems to be a little regional, or maybe somebody didn't pay a tax, or I don't know what that is all about. But ladies and gentlemen, we've had some great numbers. 2,900 of you watched the Emerald Robinson interview that Leighton was just talking about. So thank you so much for your support. If you haven't seen them, or you've seen them once and well, you're feeling guilty now that you should watch them a second or 23rd time, definitely please share those on your social media pages and give it a watch. Even try hit the mute button if you've seen it 7 times and you want to go for that 8th. We do appreciate those views and the thumbs ups and the likes. We do have the buymeacoffee.com/Gray Matter podcast. If you are feeling financially generous, I covered the view generous. Now here's the financially generous one. We do appreciate what Leighton is doing, and I know that you do as well. And so thank you. Thank you for being part of this community, checking out the Substacks. That helps us. Since Leighton has been on Daystar, we have been building a new audience in different parts of Canada, which has been great to see. And one of the things that we have been presenting to the viewers of Daystar is the Gray Matter newsletter Substack that Leighton has. We've been getting a bunch of people, new faces coming over there. So thank you. And if you are new, if you've seen Leighton on Daystar and you hadn't heard of Leighton before, thank you for following him on his social media. We do know, interesting fact before I hand it back to our fearless leader, is we have been getting a lot of views on YouTube from Argentina.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Javier Milei has been tuning in, but
he gave another great speech at the World Economic Forum. Just
The-
off the
the
charts.
man is a good orator.
Yeah.
And it's got to be the mutton chops. I don't know if they're full mutton chops, but I'm pretty sure he has that persona. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd vote for the guy, but certainly some of the people that have voted, I will
Yeah.
go out on make the assumption that his voters are tuning in on YouTube to Leighton Gray. And just another quick component, ladies and gentlemen, I'm totally pulling an audible here. I had an uncle once that said, once you're up on stage and you got the mic, just keep talking till they pull you off. But I gotta say, Argentina, in the last 28 days, 47% of Leighton's viewers
Wow.
has been Argentina. 25% the great United
God
States
bless
of
you,
America.
Argentina. Wow.
Yes.
I'm
And,
we'll have to start wearing a blue and white soccer jersey
Yes.
on here.
That's right. And
Yeah.
well, it has been said that actually the United States joined the Republic of Texas. Other people might beg to differ, but we do thank our viewers who are out there watching us, and I've gilded the lily enough. Leighton, back to you.
All right. So a lot of stuff going on in the world this week, and which is why we have our esteemed guest here. And sort of the things that have been happening reminded me of an Edmund Burke quotation in a piece that he wrote called Reflections on the Revolution in France. If you don't know about this, it's a really important piece where he was in England just looking at what was happening in France during the French Revolution. He wrote, "Rage and frenzy will pull down more in half an hour than prudence, deliberation, and foresight can build up in 100 years." And I really love this quotation because, Brandon, it sort of sums up one of the core conservative beliefs, one of the pillars of conservatism, and that is it takes a long time to build something up, to build a society, to build a canon of literature, an art tradition, things like a constitutional systems that protect civil liberties, all of these things. It takes a long time, centuries. and a lot of sweat, blood, and toil to create them. But you can bring them down very, very quickly
Yeah.
if you're not careful. And it seems like this is very applicable to what's going on in the world right now. We have people like Mark Carney,
Mhm.
who seems like if someone made a blueprint of how to destroy a country, this would be it: how to destroy Canada. But before we go there and dive in there, I'd be remiss. And your most recent book really ties into this because you've written several books, but your most recent one, and I want to start here so I don't forget, is called "How the West Lost Ukraine: A
Mm,
Disaster of Our Own Making." And
mm.
some of the theme of the book, just from looking at the summary, sort of ties into what Edmund Burke said,
Yeah.
that we can destroy something very quickly, and it's being destroyed in the Ukraine, isn't it?
Oh, it's being destroyed in Ukraine. It's already been destroyed. There's nothing left. It's like Mad Max now at the Thunderdome. There,
Wow.
the Zelensky regime, and it is a regime because we're supposedly fighting for democracy, but yet democracy has not been allowed to take hold there because they haven't had a presidential election in over almost 2 years now. They suspended it in, I want to say, May of 2024, promising to restore it in February of 25. They were waiting to see who was going to win the 24 election here. And when
Right.
Trump won, suddenly the elections in Ukraine never took place as they were promised in February 2025. It's an ancient land with an ancient government, and that an ancient culture, I should say. Not the government's not that old, but it's all gone. It's been
Yeah.
completely eviscerated. Whatever is there now is the certainly not the best. It is very much like it's like a post-apocalyptic society. And
Wow.
now I understand that Kyiv is without power, or at least it was for several days. What the Russians are doing now is the Russians are basically they're putting the squeeze on because they know they now have the Ukrainians in NATO where they want them, and they basically could have smashed the entire country pretty quickly, but they chose not to. The Russians chose that. They chose not to. And it was
Hmm.
actually the Russians were sort of counterpunching for a lot of the war. They were waiting to see what NATO or Ukraine would do, and then they would react to that. And to me, that indicates that the entire Western narrative about what Russia is after there is completely wrong.
Right.
And that makes the destruction of Ukraine even worse because we told them and we told our own people, hey, Putin is doing his Hitler thing and he's going to, take first Ukraine, then Poland, and then he'll have,
Hmm.
T-72s in Paris. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't think that's what's going on here. So all those people died and all those great cultural icons have been destroyed and the country is gone. Basically, it's being held together by a dictatorship, a kleptocratic dictatorship, and it's all been built on lies, and it's very
Wow.
sad.
Yeah. Well, in sort of the conservative sphere of things in Canada,
Hmm.
on a per capita basis, Canadians have given almost as much to Ukraine as Americans,
Yeah, it's a North
and
American
we,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and we can't, Canadians can't afford it to the same degree as Americans can, frankly.
we can't either,
Um,
though. By the way,
no, no, but the sort of the way it's described mostly, if you go on X, for example, is it's a money laundering scheme.
it is,
So,
and I detail
ex-
that in the book. By the
yeah,
way,
and if you
yeah,
could you just explain that a little bit,
yeah,
because I don't think people understand. They have this picture of like
yeah,
people washing money. So
yeah. That's
explain what money
basically what
laundering
it
is,
is.
and how
Yeah.
this is a money laundering scheme.
Yeah, so basically, in Victoria Newland, who's one of the arch villains in my book, she was the Undersecretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs. And she's, of course, Donald Kagan's wife, who is a, fire breathing neoconservative, him and his brother Robert. And Victoria Newland was nominally a Republican, a George W. Bush era Republican who had no problem working either for Obama and or later Joe Biden. And when she left government at the end of the Biden administration, she gave a final speech in which she sort of let the cat out of the bag, and I don't think she meant to. She was trying, so she said that what most of the MAGA people don't understand and the Republicans don't understand is that 99% of that money we're sending over their tax dollars is coming right back to the good old United States, and it's invigorating us. And I think what she was trying to say is it's going into arms factories in places like Scranton, Pennsylvania, but actually it's not. Actually, it's actually going into the coffers of lobbyists who are lobbying on behalf of Ukraine. It's going into the coffers of defense contractors, both here and in Europe. It is not actually going into the industrial base, and you know this because Mark Rutte, who I knew once upon a time, sort of peripherally through the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, but Mark Rutte said last year, I think last spring, he said that he gave a speech and he said he's the NATO Secretary General, and he said, well, comparatively speaking, he said Russia produces their defense industrial base produces every 3 months what it takes a year for the entire NATO industrial base to produce. And that hasn't changed.
That is astonishing.
It hasn't changed. So
Wow.
where's all that money going? Well, I can tell you because we're sending gobs of cash. We're sending gobs of cash over to Ukraine. Well, what's going on is it's basically being laundered. It's being laundered into NGOs, non-governmental organizations. It's being laundered into the back pockets of defense industrialists. It's not going into their industrial capacity because you would have seen changes in the output, but our output hasn't really changed. It's going into their back pockets. It's going for them to fund these campaigns in DC and in Europe. It's going into purchasing media and making sure the media is on side and paying off all their little cronies in Ukraine. And there's another very odd connection here. And I say this. I want to be very careful when I say this. But in my reporting about a month or two ago, there were a handful of Ukrainian oligarchs, and one of them was Zelensky's chief of staff. And they have all been charged by the Ukrainian officials. And this is a credit to Ukraine. They're trying their best, it looks like, to actually pursue corruption, but it's just so insurmountable.
It's just
like the,
whack-a-mole.
So, it's like whack-a-mole, or like the little Dutch boy with his finger in the day. It's like, but they are trying at least. But the chief of staff for Zelensky took a cartoonish amount of money, and he was indicted, or he was about to be indicted, and somebody, and I think it was Zelensky, somebody gave him a heads up, so he fled. And a lot of these oligarchs fled before the Ukrainian authorities could arrest them, and they moved their money in time. And where did they, and their money is actually U.S. tax dollars, Canadian tax dollars.
Right.
And where did they end up? Well, they happened to be dual citizens in Israel. And so they're
incredible.
And there is a very odd, I don't want to say sentimentalism, but there is a very odd sort of affinity between the Israeli elite and the Ukrainian elite. And the only thing I can think of is and my article was addressing the Israeli tax codes, because that's really what's attracting these Ukrainian oligarchs to flee with our money. And my argument was, clearly the Israelis created these very nice benefits for Jewish people everywhere to come back to Israel because they were trying to boost the economy. So it's very lax tax laws. But the problem is there's very little oversight. And I argue that now Israel is not a new country. It is a very wealthy, dynamic country. They can actually probably afford to be like, we're not going to let every person who happens to be Jewish in, to bring all their money, because maybe that money is ill-gotten. And it's doing a lot of damage now because it's not a small amount of money. And we don't know the exact amount of money, but we know that it is significant. And actually, you could make the case that that's actually going to damage the economy of Ukraine, that kind of money being taken out overnight, basically. And it's certainly damaging our economy and the Canadian and NATO economy because we keep giving it to them. So my argument, so not to go on a tangent here, but the Ukrainian war has basically become nothing more than, garbage in, garbage out. We're putting in, or I should say good money in, we're putting our tax dollars in. it gets rotated through like one of those water wheels, you know, where the water hits it and it keeps
Right.
going and it keeps going. And then it ends up in everybody who doesn't deserve it, their back pocket. It's not going to the
Mm,
Ukrainian soldier. It's not going to the widow.
yeah.
It's not going to the village that's crushed. It's maybe a little bit, but it's going into the politicians both in Ukraine and in the West, and it's going into the oligarchs who
Hmm.
have no care for Ukraine. And it's a real tragedy. It's
Yeah.
just an all around tragedy, and it's classic U.S. covert war machine. This is the pattern
Mm,
we have seen for decades
yeah.
in Afghanistan, and it's very interesting that as soon as Afghanistan shut down, within a few months, um, the Ukraine war erupted, and
Yeah.
that's when all that money was getting infused.
Yeah. I'm
So
grateful for this explanation because it explains something that just happened in Canada. I don't know if you know about this, but there's a woman named Chrystia Freeland who
mm,
is an acolyte of Klaus Schwab,
mm.
and actually was
Was she the one who
mentored
had the
by
word
George Soros.
salad, the word salad
Yeah,
at
yeah,
Davos? Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
she's written a
She's a real
book which is
gem.
just really
Yeah,
second rate
yeah.
socialist pap. But anyway, she was the deputy prime minister of Canada
Mm,
under the Justin Trudeau regime. She had to resign in disgrace, but then, of course, she got reelected with Mark Carney. She was in his government, but she recently resigned from her post in Canada to go over and be a special financial advisor to
oh,
Mr.
she's very.
Zelensky.
Oh, she's going to
And
be very
your
wealthy.
explanation,
She's going to be very
to-
wealthy.
yeah,
Yeah,
that makes that
yeah.
totally makes sense.
And don't forget also, Leighton, real quick. Not only is it a money laundering machine, but it's also a progressive social experiment. Ukraine.
Right.
Remember, one of the spokespeople who's very prominent at the beginning of the war, although this individual's not really around anymore. But when Biden was president, one of the spokespeople for Ukraine was a transgendered person.
Oh,
it
yes, I
it
remember
was a
this.
man who wore a wig, and it
Yeah.
turned out this individual was actually an American originally who moved to Ukraine. Which
Yeah.
there's a lot of weirdness there, but there's a lot of weird social experimentation of left wing variances. They're brutalizing the Russian Orthodox Church in
Yeah.
Ukraine.
That's a
Um,
travesty.
it is, and I realize that it is a little bit different, the Russian Orthodox Church from, say, the Vatican. But at the end of the day, I mean, I really seriously doubt the Ukrainians who are worshiping at the Russian Orthodox Church are spies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe there's one or two, but all of them, and you
Mm.
have to crush the whole. I mean, that's what they're doing in China to the Christians, right?
Yeah.
The whole church gets bulldozed. I mean, that's
Yeah.
clearly there's something going on there. And
Yeah.
then you look at sort of speaking of the wealth. I mean, all you have to do is go on Twitter or X now, or go on YouTube and just type in Ukraine nightlife, and you will see the Bugattis, and you will see the exorbitant wealth, or you'll find
Mhm.
also videos of Monte Carlo, places like that,
Bizarre. Wow.
and they're all Ukrainian license plates. Well,
Mm.
those Ukrainians 5 years ago had probably nothing, and it
Yeah.
was all money that they extracted from us. And
Wow.
it is the most corrupt in enterprise probably since Obama came.
And yet everybody's talking about Somali daycare,
Yeah,
whereas
well, yeah, that's
Ukraine
another
dwarfs
thing. Yeah,
that by
Ukraine, yeah,
degrees of
yeah,
magnitude. Anyway,
yeah.
this
Yes,
is
it
this is
does.
fascinating. I'm so
Yeah,
glad I asked you about the book, folks. It's called A Disaster of Our Own Making: How the West Lost Ukraine.
yeah.
Now, Brandon, people can find your book on Amazon. Where else can they find it?
Anywhere books are sold. I mean,
Okay.
Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart. I don't know what the equivalents in Canada are. You can
Yeah.
find it also. I mean, I always encourage people try to get it from your local bookstore.
Yeah.
Usually, at least down here in Florida, if the stores don't carry it, I can ask them. As a
Yeah.
customer, I don't tell them it's my book. I just say, hey, can I get can I get a couple copies, and then they'll get it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I've ordered mine. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Thank
I've
you.
read, as you know, several of your other books. One of
Yes.
your books is on China, and I kind of
Yeah.
want to turn the conversation
Okay.
over there because
Yeah.
a lot of the things you talk about in your book are sort of happening to Canada, and
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
all sort of concentrating on what's going on over at the World Economic Forum. And
Yeah.
Donald Trump was there and he gave this big speech. And we had Dr. Murray Sabin on our show
Oh yeah, he
last
lives
year.
down here. He
Yeah,
lives right down the road from me.
yeah. So he's
Yeah.
like you. He is somebody who calls balls and strikes. He's not out there waving the pom poms for Donald Trump. And
Yeah.
he wrote something really interesting on his Substack about Donald Trump's speech. I want to share this with you and get your
Please.
take on it. He says,
I didn't see
Donald,
it, so please. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
see what he said about the speech.
yeah, I don't
so
know
please,
if Michael can put this up on the screen, but I'll read it. It says Donald Trump's Davos speech was less a vision for global prosperity than a familiar exercise in grievance, self-congratulation, and ideological contradiction. Speaking to an audience of global business and political leaders, Trump framed himself as the singular defender of economic success while simultaneously advancing a worldview that depends heavily on state power, political favoritism, and centralized control. So what do you think about that?
No, I think
You've been saying similar things in
Yeah.
some of your
I'm
your
definitely
writing.
not welcome at Mar-a-Lago anymore, which is fine because I'm a homebody anyway. I really am like ever since having kids, like I really don't like going to
Yeah.
events. I really it's fine. I don't have to be invited. But I think Murray is probably right, generally speaking. I'm supportive in general of using protectionism in a strategic, tactical way.
Yeah.
I don't believe Trump is applying the protectionist measures in a rational way at all. I think that I don't understand it. I do start to worry just because in my family, I've recently dealt with my wife's now deceased stepfather who had dementia. I'm starting to worry that there might be something to these claims. At first, I thought it was just left wing.
He sounds kind of tired, doesn't he?
He looks tired too.
Yeah, and
I've
this has been
following him
his
for years. And
his signature feature is his energy.
yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's
Yeah.
very impressive that he can fly across I mean, he's 70 some odd years old.
Yeah.
I mean, it is
77,
impressive that he
78.
can make those flights, and apparently
Yeah.
he doesn't sleep on the flights. He's always working or whatever, or he's raging into into Twitter. But it's very interesting, that aspect. But he does look in these speeches haggard and tired.
Yeah.
I'll just get into it here. I mean, to address what Murray said, I think Murray's right generally.
Yeah.
At the same time, I agree in principle with this notion that old world order that existed at least since 91 is gone. It's a tripolar system now. It's a dog eat dog world now. In a way, it always was, but before, because America was so overwhelmingly dominant, we could sort of have alignment and we could kind of keep everybody on side.
Yeah.
But those days are done. And the Ukraine war proved it. The Russian military may not be not have as much finesse as the American military, but at the end of the day, as the Russians I know tell me, hey, we're taking on not just Ukraine, but all of NATO, and we're winning.
Yeah.
And so, we can do all the Caracas raids that we want and kidnap Maduro, and it's all very stylish and very Hollywood, and it looks great, and it's incredible. I mean, it's a great victory for Donald Trump at the tactical level.
Right.
But can the United States at the strategic level achieve what Trump is trying to do, or what Trump says he's trying to do?
Right.
And what I want him to do. And this comes down to application rather than theory. I don't think he has it in him to actually square this circle. I mean, the kind of pivot that the United States has to make in how much time does he have left? 32 months in his term? Really less.
Or less, because that
he's
last year is...
He's going to lose the midterms.
Yeah.
He's going to lose the midterms, and it'll be a miracle if he doesn't. But so what I'm getting at here, and I don't mean to kind of go off on a tangent, but what I'm getting at here is a lot of what he says is probably where we should be going, and it's where I agree with, but the application is always very shambolic. And, his speech in Davos, I I laughed at it. I thought, okay,
The greatest
I mean,
economy in the history of
I
the
mean,
world.
this is like when I can tell you, I live in a very red district. I live in,
Right.
I'm in a very, very Trump district, and people around here, when he says that, they get very angry because
Mm.
I can tell you our grocery prices are
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
Most Americans are, one bad medical visit away from being put into bankruptcy because of how distorted the insurance market here has become due to government interference. Usually,
Yeah.
um, it's not the greatest economy, but I mean, quantitatively, you can prove it's not the greatest economy.
Right.
And I wish it were. And all of the foreign policy, there's this thing American presidents do, and feel free to cut me off, but
No, no. No, this is
there's
fascinating.
there's this thing American presidents do in the modern age. When they can't achieve domestic success, they immediately pivot and they focus foreign policy.
Obama did
And
that, didn't he?
Obama did that.
Yeah.
Bush did that.
Mhm.
And you could even argue Bush technically until 08 had kind of a better economy than Trump
Yeah.
second term did.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to reorganize the United States for this new tripolar order where it isn't going to be the rule of law. It's going to have to be the rule of the jungle.
Yeah.
The problem is he doesn't seem to either have the right personnel, and he certainly doesn't have the temperament for that kind of a policy shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is going to require so much discipline
Yeah.
and vision. I mean, I'm sorry, Scott Bessent, who I actually like, but the former Soros money manager is not going to be the guy that's going to implement these big policy changes. I mean, he's a step up from, Gary Cohn and,
Yeah. Yeah.
from the first term or whoever, who was it? It was Gary Cohn and who was it? Mnuchin.
Yeah.
Mnuchin was
Yeah.
horrible. But it's very unfortunate because I do feel at times, like we're in the last decade of the Soviet Union, and clearly Biden was our Chernenko, and I'm starting to worry that Trump's going to be our Gorbachev.
Or
And-
Boris Yeltsin.
Well, he might be a very,
They, they look a little bit alike.
They do, and they act a little bit alike. I thought it was
Yeah.
interesting. Susie Wiles in that interview, the chief of staff for the White House, and I can't believe she got away with that Vanity Fair interview a month ago. But she made the comment, and her father was a legendary alcoholic. She made the comment that Trump has an alcoholic's personality.
Interesting.
And because I come from a family that has a lot of alcoholism. I know exactly what she's talking about.
Yeah.
And she's right. He may never touch a drop of liquor, but he certainly has certain personality quirks that certainly remind me of what an alcoholic acts
That is
like.
fascinating. You should write one of your books on that. Well, actually, I think I'm not going to tell you. Your next book should either be about Russia or about Canada.
Yeah.
But because, but anyway, because you've covered a lot of these topics. I mean,
Yeah.
you've written about Iran, and I read your book on Iran, and it is incredibly prescient. Some of the things
Yeah.
you write about in your book
I
about
did
Iran.
predict 10-7 like a year and a half
Yeah,
before it happened.
and you actually in the book you predict what's happening right now,
yeah.
which is really remarkable.
Well,
But
thank
I
you.
guess it just shows that you really do your research. You're not
It's
going
all
off
about
sort
pattern recognition. That's
Yeah.
all it is. I wish I could say it's some great, I have a lot of understanding because I studied this stuff really in depth in school. I worked in government for a little bit, and that gave me insight sort of in the practitioner side of the thing, but of the industry. But really, it's just pattern recognition. You just absorb as much information as you can, and you talk to as many experts as you can, and you start to see a pattern.
Yeah.
And so far, my pattern recognition has been solid.
Yeah,
I-
very
I-
solid.
I predicted the 12-day war when we did the B-2 bombings. I got on Twitter and I predicted that morning. I said, between 7 and 9 o'clock tonight, they're going to drop bombs. The U.S. will, and it was like 9 o'clock.
Yeah,
And I
actually,
had,
I was on your I saw on your X page.
You saw
Yeah.
the people threatening me with
Yeah.
FBI raids.
Yeah.
And well, I wish I could say, because they were like, "Who's your source?" Well, I do talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people like talking to me on off the record. But on that one, that was just my own instinct, reading the room and seeing the pattern.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm really hopeful that my hope is that Trump can. He has an. I heard somebody else say this today. Trump's an escape artist, and he will pin himself in a corner, of his own making. Nobody else is. I mean, the only person who can take Trump down is Trump. So he will
Yeah.
do these things and put himself in a corner, and therefore pin America in a corner, and then he somehow magically, maneuvers out of it and
Which might
completely
be part of the alcoholic personality that you're
well, yeah,
describing.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And so, my hope is that in another couple weeks or months, he's going to wake up and be like, "Holy cow, this isn't working," I don't know because he's running out of runway.
Yeah, and the
He's running out
stakes
of
are
runway.
very
Yeah,
high, aren't they? By the way, folks, Brandon's book on China is called Biohacked: China's Race to Control Life.
yeah,
Really fascinating book. I read this, and he describes a lot of what's going on right now in China and what China's real sort of plan is long term for the world and the new world order. And Brandon, I want to ask you about something you posted recently that
mm,
really caught my eye. You said recent earthquake in northwest China might have been something more. You were saying that maybe that they might be doing some
yeah,
nuclear
yeah.
testing
Nuclear
in
testing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. What
That was
makes you
never.
think that
Yeah.
that's what's happening over there?
So what? Well, China's right now on a nuclear weapons building spree. And actually, though, that piece is not recent. That piece is from a while ago. That looks like
Yeah.
that's the one from the Weigert report.
Yeah.
But beginning around 5 or 6 years ago, the Chinese have been on a nuclear weapons building spree,
Why aren't we
and
hearing about this? And
we
why
actually
doesn't
don't
anybody
really
know
know.
about this?
The intelligence community here has an idea of how many nukes they have, but I think that that's completely wrong. I think China has considerably more nuclear weapons than we know about because what they have is the ability to hide those nuclear weapons in a very advanced honeycomb of underground tunnels. And they
Oh,
transport their nuclear weapons like the Russians. They don't keep their nuclear weapons stationary. They keep them on moving vehicles
mm,
on the backs of what is it, transporter erector
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
trucks
Yeah,
and on the backs of trains, and a lot of those trains are underground, and
yeah.
so it's very hard for us to get an accurate count. And unlike the Russians and the Soviets before them, you know, the Soviets in the Cold War were very dedicated to having a red line with Washington, to having that ability in a nuclear crisis to have direct access to the American president and to communicate intentions, and for the president to do likewise to them. And that averted a lot of misunderstandings, and that probably saved the world from nuclear Armageddon. The Chinese have a very different view. They view sharing any bit of national security information, especially related to their nukes, with a rival like the United States. They believe that that's a sign of weakness, and they believe that it runs counter to their interests.
Mm,
So they purposely try to hide from us their real nuclear capabilities. They have
mm.
no interest in doing like an open skies treaty like we do with the
Right.
Russians, where we get to take pictures of each other's airspace to see where those nuclear weapons are and we can count how
Mm-hmm.
many they have. They don't care about transmitting to the world, international community, this is how many nuclear weapons we have. They want to do the opposite. They want to hide it because they want to
Mm-hmm.
keep it all, for a surprise, and they want to keep the Americans off guard and keep the Russians off guard.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, and we have since in the last few years, Bill Gertz at the Washington Times. I've also reported this in my own reporting. We are discovering all kinds of nuclear weapons facilities and nuclear weapons silos that we didn't know existed in the Gobi Desert, and it looks like they've been built in the last few years. Very quickly and in large numbers, which means that they are on a nuclear weapons building spree, and they just launched the new Type 96 nuclear powered nuclear submarine, nuclear weapons submarine. So it's the
Right.
answer to our Ohio class or our
Mm-hmm.
Columbia class, which is forthcoming. And
Mm.
that's basically their submarine that carries nuclear weapons. That's their second strike SLBM, sea launched ballistic missile. and they are now churning those things out like sausages. Now, Andrei Martyanov, my dear friend, who is a former Soviet naval officer, and he's an engineer and real interesting military analyst, he insists to me that, well, they may have numbers, but the technical proficiency for those submarines is nothing compared to either the Russian or the Americans. And I agree with him, but
Mhm.
ultimately, quantity has a quality all of its own.
Yes.
And the Chinese are clearly shoring up and expanding and modernizing their nuclear weapons capability at a time when we are not.
Are they praying? Are they preparing for
I can't hear
war
you.
in your opinion? I of course have noticed that everybody has been anticipating for a long time that they were going to make some sort of move on Taiwan. But what do you think the military buildup is all about?
I can't hear you.
Oh,
Can
I'm
you hear
sorry.
me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you too, Brandon. I'm not sure if it's a setting on your side,
Oh.
which
Michael, you can hear me?
I can.
Okay, great.
Should I?
Yeah. Brandon, are you back?
Am I
I think maybe his 2-year-old was crawling around
hello?
playing with
Can you
buttons.
hear me? I still can't hear
Oh.
you.
Oh,
We can hear you, Brandon.
Should I hang up and try to log back in?
Yeah, let's do that.
sure.
Okay.
What a fascinating conversation.
Man, I tell you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, one of the things I want to do with Brandon is sort of turn towards Canada to talk about, the implications of what Prime Minister Carney is doing
Mhm.
in terms of cozying up to China, given, a lot of this background that Brandon is so great at giving about what's really going on in places
Can you
like
hear me?
Ukraine and China. Oh, yeah, here he's back.
We can.
Yeah.
I can hear
So,
you now.
Brandon-
It was weird. I couldn't
Yeah.
hear you. You just.
I was
yeah.
asking you, Brandon, about why you think China is engaged in this military buildup. Are they preparing for war, or is there some other purpose?
Oh, they're preparing for war.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Here's the deal. And I think this is part of Trump's new world order or new world disorder. The president, and I think Trump has already assessed, and his team, I should say, have already assessed that we are not going to be able to defend Taiwan under any circumstances. So we may bluster and we may try to bluff and keep the Chinese from pulling the trigger as long as possible. But the longer we do that, the weaker we become, the more overstretched we become under current conditions, and the more likely to attack. And in fact, China is to attack Taiwan and to defeat the United States military in a straight up fight. As it stands right now, by the way, Heritage Foundation, I love Heritage. I love Kevin. I love all those guys
Yeah.
involved. These are great people. But I've been saying this for years, okay, at the National Interest, and they know it. They didn't need to develop an AI program. They could have just called me and hired me. But the Heritage Foundation created an AI algorithm to do a war game, China versus the United States over Taiwan. And the results were so mortifying for Team America that Heritage worked with the government to cover up part of the conclusions of their recent. Now they released the basic findings, but there were, and I know what they are because I've been writing about them. I know I can identify half a dozen at least of the vulnerabilities they're classifying with the government, but I know what they are, and the Americans are not going to be able to shore them up, not in the time frame that we have. And I think the Trump administration knows that, and I think the Trump administration has made a quiet calculation that yes, publicly they will do the rah-rah, we stand with Taiwan, we don't want to see China, but ultimately, if China really decides to go for it, the Americans are not going to stop them.
So is this, Brandon, part of the reason why the Trump administration, especially Donald Trump, are so bullish on Greenland and talking about, because we know that China is very active in the Arctic and so is Russia.
Yep.
And so is that sort of the strategic mission there with Greenland?
My view is that Trump and his team are keenly aware that China is ready to go very soon to attack Taiwan and to fundamentally reshape the world order in a way that no American is wanting to have reshaped.
Right.
And what they're doing right now is, this is like the last, what is it they said in Lord of the Rings, the last gasp before the great plunge. What you're seeing in what you're seeing in Venezuela, what you're seeing in Cuba, or potentially in Cuba, what you're seeing in the Panama Canal Zone, the Drake Passage, what you're seeing with Alberta in terms of the Trump administration interest in Alberta, what you're seeing with the Arctic and Greenland, what you're seeing even with Iran. These are the final movements before the big war begins. And what the Trump team is trying to do is they are trying to basically weaken and cut up the Chinese advantage as much as possible. And you look at their targets, right? Venezuela and Iran. These are not separate issues. These are linked. These are together. And it's over the oil. The problem the Trump administration is running into, the problem that no one's talking about, Venezuela, China got less than 4% of their oil from. Iran, China gets at most 15% of their oil from. Right. So yeah, we can knock these regimes out probably. I think Iran's going to be a mess, but we can probably at least stop the oil from flowing to China. China can easily shift over to other sources. And let's say that they lose their Middle East access in general, because they get more oil from Saudi Arabia and Oman and Iraq than they do from Iran. Or maybe it's as much. I don't hold me to that, but ultimately they can shift to another Middle East source. But let's just say the Middle East in general, because we know Iraq is getting ready to fall. Iraq is getting ready to collapse to ISIS, which is working for us. I mean, ISIS is a construct of U.S. intelligence, and they are. The Chinese, though, can easily pivot to their next door neighbor, who we can't do anything to, and that's Russia.
Yeah. And where's Russia going to land in this war you're talking about? What do you think?
Well, if Trump stops escalating in Ukraine, if he actually sits down and just gets a deal, there'd be no problem. The Russians would be on our side. Yeah. Or at least they would not be as helpful to the Chinese as they've been. They were only partnered with the Chinese. It's out of a last resort. In a tripolar system, two of the three powers always try to align against the third. And this is why scholars like Richard Roscrans and Randall Schweller Jr. and several others who've written about tripolarity, they in all of their studies, a tripolar system ultimately collapses into a major war in which only two or one power remains, ultimately because a tripolar system is always unstable. They're never three evenly matched powers. There's always, unevenness.
Yeah. That's sort of like what happened in World War I, isn't it?
To a degree, yes.
England and Germany and France.
Absolutely, yes. And Randall Schweller's book, Deadly Imbalances, which came out in 1999. He's a professor at Ohio University, I think. But he was a Columbia PhD guy. But his study, Deadly Imbalances, was actually on the interwar years, and he studied his argument, and I think it's very valid. His argument is that the interwar years was really a tripolar system, that it was a tripolar system, and he has a whole explanation for it. I'm not going to get into it, but he basically says the U.S., the Soviet Union, and Nazi Germany. Those were the three poles before the war began. And those three poles, and they were bringing other allies with them, of course, jockeying against each other. They were constantly shifting. Remember, the Soviets and the Nazis were partners first, and the Soviets flipped. So that's a tripolar system, and it collapses every time into something else. So we are living in a tripolar era, and this is why it's so uneven. This is why it's so chaotic, and Trump is right to identify that. But what I'm seeing in the world right now is the last desperate moves before the actual big war, the shooting war, initiates. And it's a war that, if it's fought close to China's shores, it is a war that we will lose under current conditions decisively.
Wow. But you've written about the role that space is going to play
Yeah.
in the next, and people don't think about this
No,
because it's not reported on. But
no,
the control of space is
It's
going to be
everything.
it's going to be more important than naval was or air power was in the Great War and World War II,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Well, yeah. Well, space power is the new naval power, and in my
Yeah.
book, Winning Space, that was, one of the big things I tried to get across. That was my first book ever, Winning Space. One of the big things I tried to get across was this idea that I likened a lot of it to Alfred Mahan, the guy, the famous strategist in the 19th century who influenced Teddy Roosevelt. He was a Navy captain, U.S. Navy captain, and he wrote The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. And basically, his argument was for the United States to be a truly dominant, or not empire, but a dominant power in the world, it had to control the sea lanes. Today, I believe if you want to be the dominant power and have real military overmatch, you can't just use space, because we use space all the time, but you have
Right.
to also be able to defend what you've got in space, because now our enemies are figuring out ways to neuter us in space, because they understand the
Yeah.
first shot of any new great power war will be fired in the cosmos, and in about half an hour they will be able to basically dismantle the US military electronically without ever having to actually engage a single American Marine in combat.
Wow. And it'll take more than a call to Elon Musk to hook up Starlink
Well,
Wi-Fi to fix it.
before 2022, actually, that was probably the thing that would have worked. But now, because Elon was bullied by Biden or Biden's apparatchiks, rather, because Biden
Mhm.
wasn't doing anything,
Yeah.
but by his team, because he was bullied into giving Starlink to the Ukrainians for free. And then Starlink was used to basically keep the Ukrainians in the war. People don't realize in modern combat, speed kills. You have to be fast, you have to be nimble, and you have to be able to do it across a long territorial arc, which means you've got to have dynamite communication capabilities. The Russians, like us, condition their forces. One of the first moves they make in a war is they cut off the electronics of the enemy.
Right.
And they were doing that to Ukraine until Elon stepped in and he said, you can use my Starlink. And because of the architecture of Starlink, it was very hard at the time to knock out. It's a redundant system by design.
Yeah.
And what the Russians and the Chinese spent the last 3-4 years doing is developing specific anti-satellite capabilities to overcome the disaggregated nature of America's, of Starlink at least. And it's the
Wow.
model of the new satellite constellations.
Fascinating. Yeah.
But
you don't think about communications and how important they are to warfare, but this just reminded me of what the Nazis did during their blitzkriegs when they were going across through the Ardennes and knocking at all the telegraph lines, and that's a really important feature that people don't think
and the
about.
maneuver. Remember, you talk about the Ardennes, I mean, the French and actually the Americans a few years later at the Battle of the Bulge, the French made the mistake of assuming that, oh no, they can't get through the Ardennes, it's too thick, the terrain's too bad. And the Germans had developed an entirely new system of warfare. And by the way, the same thing was told to Storm Norman Schwarzkopf in Desert Storm. They told him, you can't take the tanks through that desert. They'll get bogged down. You'll never make it. And what was the silver bullet for U.S. forces in Schwarzkopf's famous left hook through the desert? It was the satellites. It was GPS.
Yes.
Nobody knew about GPS back then.
That
was it.
Fascinating.
So now we have this military that is completely reliant on these satellites, and those satellites are very vulnerable. One thing I'll add, linking Iran back to this, those protests. The reason that the protests ultimately did not reach critical mass to overthrow the government was because the Iranians, they say, took down the 40,000 Starlink terminals, but they didn't say how. I know how. I know how, and I broke the news. I broke the news recently at National Interest, and I noticed the New York Times isn't banging down my door to find out more.
A former newspaper,
right? The former newspaper. The Russians gave the Iranians their experimental Kalinka system, and you remember when we attacked Maduro, we used some exotic new weapons to test on,
Mhm.
in combat. Well, the Russians are doing the same thing with Iran on us. So
Wow.
they developed a system called Kalinka that is specifically designed to fry Starlink satellites. And they gave it to the Iranians, knowing the Iranians would have to use it. And they've learned quite a lot. They've learned, the Russians
Interesting.
now know how to scale that up. They know what
Yeah.
works. And by the way, it's not just Starlink now, because the U.S. military purchased from Elon Star Shield, and Star Shield
Right.
is the military version of Starlink, runs on the same concept. Yeah, there's a little bit more protections for it, but ultimately it's the same infrastructure, the same base idea. And now the Russians and Chinese know how to knock those systems out. And all those years of development, it's all gone now.
Okay. Now, I'm so glad that you went into all that detail and talking of scaring the bejesus out of everybody about, World War III. Now I want to come to Canada, because all what you've said starts to make a lot of sense in answering the question, why would Prime Minister Carney poke Donald Trump in the eye and cozy up to the Chinese? But when you start explaining this tripolar system,
Yeah.
it begins to make a lot of sense. And of course, Carney was over there talking about the New World Order.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
Donald Trump fires back at the World Economic Forum. He says, Canada lives because the United States. Remember that, Mark.
Yeah.
And there's a funny meme here. If you can pull this one up, Michael. Donald Trump says, Mark Carney is succeeding at bankrupting Canada, putting it in a position for the World Economic Forum and China to take it over. As president of the United States, I will never allow communist authoritarian dictatorship like the people of Davos to run the country next to us. It's just not going to happen on my watch.
Yeah.
So now this starts to make sense, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Why Mark Carney is doing this. But my question for you, Brandon, is if Mark Carney is aware of this tripolar situation you're talking about, why is he pulling Canada towards China and not towards our natural ally and friend and brother, the United States? Why is he doing that?
Because as long as Donald Trump is in the White House, the globalist agenda is not on the table. If it was Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, I don't think this would be, well, certainly it wouldn't be happening. To be fair, Trump also, it takes two to tango. His 51st state comments at the beginning of the administration, I mean, they were hilarious, but it's like, okay, like that's how you're going to do your opening bid. And I think what it did was it put the elites in Canada on a defensive crouch.
Yeah.
And I mean, you and I talked about this a
Yes.
year ago, that
Yeah.
this was what took down Paul Lavoie, however you say
Yeah.
his name.
Yeah.
Because he would have won. But I also make the case, and I think I said this to you back then, I'm not convinced Trump wanted a strong Canadian leader. I think so. Let me just put it to you this way.
Well, he doesn't have one, Mark Carney.
Well, and that's what I think.
But
I think Trump is. Yeah, that's right. I think Trump had a feeling that whether it was Trudeau or one of his successors from the left, this is exactly what they were going to do, because it's like a vestigial itch. They can't help it. They want to run to the commies whenever there's a Republican, particularly a strong Republican, in the White House, particularly one that's talking about annexing large swaths of Canada, and who's highlighting real trade imbalances and real. I mean, Trump is not wrong when he's like, Canada's economy is basically an extension of the United States economy.
80% of our trade is
Yeah,
with
and
the
if
US.
there's a map that shows where like the highest populated areas of Canada are, and it's like right across the border from the US. And
we're
that's
sort
not
of like America's top hat,
That's right. And that's not meant to diminish Canada.
Sort of an
'cause I'm a
evil
fan
top
of
hat these
Canada.
days. In terms
Yeah,
of
that's
government.
right. Yeah, one with a lot of holes. But that's not to diminish Canada, but it is just a fact of life.
Yeah.
And so by
We're living
highlighting
next to the world hegemon. We're living
that's
next
right.
to the world's greatest,
and it's actually
made
kind of a
history's greatest
miracle.
economy, right?
It's kind of a miracle given our size that like Canada has never really had to worry. I mean, they back in the day, but like in the last 100 years, Canada hasn't really had to worry about like an aggressive America kind of poking them.
But what we've done, and you know this, Brandon, and a lot of Canadians don't realize this, we've done the same thing that Europe has
Yeah.
in the post-war era, and that is we just shuffled off all responsibility
Yep.
to defend Canada
Yep.
onto the United States. At the end of World War II, we had the fourth largest navy in the world.
Yep.
And it's pathetic what we've allowed this. And it's very, when Trump says this, you know, he says, you know, without us, you know, Canada wouldn't exist. There's a lot of truth in that.
There's a
And
lot of truth in that.
That's shameful for Canada.
It
not
is. It's an
fair
indictment of the
to-
Canadian leadership.
It
what
is, and it's
Yeah.
not fair to the American people
Yeah.
to make them responsible for defense of the entire quote unquote free world.
Well, it's
you know.
not fair if the expectation is we're not going to get anything out of it. I mean, at the end of the day, look, if Canada didn't exist and there was just an open space between us and the Russians in the Arctic and the Chinese in the Arctic, I have a feeling that in the Arctic, the United States could probably hold its own, regardless of whether Canada was involved or not.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's sort of the principle of the issue. If we're now going to be on the hook for doing all of these, you know, these activities and ostensibly in defense of Canada, and we're giving you all these beneficial trade deals, and then it's like the leadership of Canada pivots and is at the slightest argument, they go to China to try to get leverage. That's the move you're going to make. That's not going to help. That's going to actually, because I said this to another podcaster in Canada earlier this week. What's the one excuse, whether it's true or not, I don't care. But in the context of what we're talking about, what is the one excuse Trump has given for attacking Maduro, for going after Greenland, going after Cuba, talking a lot about Panama Canal, talking a lot about Alberta? The one, well, not Alberta, but all the other ones except Alberta. The one excuse has always been Chinese influence. We don't want Chinese influence. Right.
Yeah.
Well, now here's Mark Carney, like opening the gates to Chinese influence, and he's doing it in a public way, knowing full well Trump is a reality TV star at heart. If you start publicly humiliating him, he is going to find a way to make you look horrible. And
he succeeded.
And he has succeeded. And so in a way, I think Trump might have set a trap for Carney.
Yeah.
I think Trump might have set a trap because he wants to have an excuse when, this is my theory. This is not me talking to any, this is just me. I mean, I told this to Steve Bannon privately, but
you have been right a lot, Brandon.
Right. My theory is the White House is assuming the referendum's going to go forward, but maybe it doesn't make it, maybe it doesn't pass the vote, or it doesn't happen for whatever reason, or it gets on the ballot, but they don't vote, not enough, who knows? But for whatever reason, the initiative doesn't work. Alberta doesn't vote its way to independence. Trump's then going to do what he did in 2020. He's going to say the vote is rigged. And he goes, and my people need me. This is what I think. This is my personal opinion. And he's going to be talking after that about how like they want to be free, and their government now is imposing China upon them, and that's a direct threat to us and the resources of Alberta. And I think he could very well in the next 6 months to a year.
Brandon, that never occurred to me that it would unfold that way.
And everybody knows if you remove, real quick, everybody knows if you remove Alberta from the Canadian Confederacy, the whole thing falls apart.
It falls apart. Yeah. But I never thought of it in those terms. I did think that if there were a situation of civil unrest, like we had with the Freedom Convoy and the way that was taken down. And by the way, one of our highest courts just declared that what the government did illegal. But if that would have happened while Trump was president, I think that he might have sent, peacekeepers in there. And then of course, they would stay. But what you described had never occurred to me.
That's what I think is going to happen. Personally, I think that's how this is going to play out.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense actually. But my deepest fear, Brandon, is that Canada could become the site of the next proxy war. We could become Ukraine. That's a real worry for me.
Yeah,
but maybe that sounds insane, but I mean,
no, it doesn't, because
I
think there are enough Canadians who would probably want to resist on sheer pride, because there's parts of Canada that I think are very similar to America in terms of the outlook.
Oh yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, the objective is not all of Canada. The objective is Alberta. That's the key. I don't think Trump really cares about the rest of Canada. I think he wants Alberta because look, the three power centers behind Trump, the control node, if you will, or the
Mhm.
control grid, as Catherine Austin Fitts calls it, the three groups behind him politically are the finance bros, Jamie Dimon,
Mhm.
the broligarchs, the tech bros, not
Right.
just Elon Musk, but all of the tech bros.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other group are the Zionists. And we've seen he's very good at doing what Miriam Adelson's group wants him to do. He's because they gave him a lot of money. He's very
Interesting.
good. He's very good at appeasing the banksters, and he's very good about throwing red meat to the tech oligarchs. Eric Schmidt, about a year or two ago, gave a speech at Stanford. Eric Schmidt was the CEO of Google. He was the founder of Google for years. He's no longer, but he's still like an icon in the tech sector. And he is
Yeah.
actually a very high end consultant for the Pentagon. He's basically an arms dealer now. But he gave a speech to Stanford, and the speech was immediately taken down because it was secretly recorded. He said things, and you can still find it online. But he said things in that speech that were very telling. He one of the things he fixated on for a long time was he said, he's a big proponent of AI. He said the only issue with AI right now is in the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to be hitting the wall with energy and water. And he said, so when it comes to the energy issue for sustaining AI development and research, he said there's really two places where we can look for growth in energy. One is the Middle East, and he said one is North America. And he said the issue with the Middle East is all the political instability. And he said, and it's a headache. He said, but Alberta has the second or the largest
Yeah.
geothermal energy sources in the world.
Yes.
And geothermal is one of the technologies that the tech bros are convinced will make AI energy generation viable
Wow.
and sustainable.
That is mind blowing.
And so I think that's part of this going on.
Wow. You've blown the doors off us again, Brandon. It's always great to talk to you because of my brain hurts afterwards. You open all these doors.
This is why I don't get invited.
But you open all these doors, you let a lot of light in. You talk about darkness, but you also let a lot of light in. And wow, crazy. Folks, we've been talking with Brandon Weichert. He's been our guest here on the live stream. Check out his books. His books are really readable. They're wonderful. He has a real talent for explaining, as you've seen him do in the past hour, explaining really complex ideas in ways that those of us who don't follow this stuff all the time can understand. And his books are really beautifully written, very readable. And his most recent book is about what's going on in Ukraine. It's called A Disaster of Our Own Making, but he's got several other books. A brilliant book on Iran, which if you read it now, you'll think, wow, how did he know this stuff? He's also written one called Biohacked, China's Race to Control Life, which explains kind of the Chinese mind and the Chinese philosophy and how different it is from ours. But check out his books. Also, Brandon, where else can people find you? And obviously on X, but where else can they find all the stuff that you write?
On X, it's at We the Brandon is my handle. You can find me on the nationalinterest.org, where I'm a senior national security editor. I write 4 essays every day, 5 days a week.
Wow. Yeah. Bravo, man.
Well, thank you. They pay me well. But you can really find me, and I would ask your audience to we've just started doing it in the last few months. It's a show called National Security Talk on Rumble, and it's a sort of a companion show to a weekly radio program that I host called the National Security Hour. And as I was telling you, Leighton, the reason this Rumble thing came about is because I have wonderful guests. Unlike you, though, they're usually not very good with managing the time. And so I was finding for a 53-minute radio show, I had content for 2 to 3 hours. And these are wonderful guests. And so my wife was like, why don't you just use 53 minutes of the 2 or 3 hours for the radio, and then the rest goes on to a Rumble or a YouTube? And I said, that's great. So I've interviewed really interesting people in the last few months, and it's NatSec Talk on Rumble. And we're getting ready to upload. I'm getting ready to upload. Let's see. William Van Wagenen, who is an expert in Syria. He wrote a book called Creative Chaos.
Yeah.
And it's all about the truth about the Syrian civil war. And he came on to talk about what I think is going to happen next, which is that al-Shara, the president of Syria, who's ISIS really, or Al-Qaeda, he's working for the Americans. All the Kurds that he's killing is on behalf of the US and Turkey. And this is part of a larger movement for going into Iraq, because the US pulled most of its forces out of Iraq, and the Syrians are moving in. This is why they're releasing all the ISIS prisoners. They're reconstituting ISIS to use as shock troops for Donald Trump's plan to regime change Iran. So
Wow, my head is spinning.
and
I don't
that's
know
the
how you
episode.
keep track of this stuff.
Well, because I'm editing the episode right
bless you.
now, and it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah, it sounds
incredible.
just fascinating. Yeah. Well, I'm going to
Yeah.
give that a listen, and we'll provide the link so people can.
Yeah, I'll send you the links
find
as
out
soon as
more.
they're posted.
But
Yeah.
but folks, do buy the books. The books are wonderful, and also check out Brandon's show. Brandon, we're really grateful that you've
Thank you.
taken this time to be with us tonight. I love having just the freedom of having a live conversation, because
It's nice.
we can kind of let you rock and go off on tangents.
Hopefully
but you
people
know,
can
it all
follow,
seems
because
to-
sometimes I go all over the
yeah,
place.
but you
It was good.
seem to be able to bring it all together. So
Well,
bravo.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So what we're gonna do, Michael, I'm gonna throw it back to you,
Yeah.
and maybe you can, if you got a few comments you want to read, or people have questions for Brandon, we can go through those, or if not, then you can lead us in a closing prayer.
No, it's been good. A riveting conversation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will let this rabbit out of the hat that these two fine gentlemen are actually getting together next week to record an episode
Yeah.
for Gray Matter.
We have lots more to talk about.
If
Yeah.
you thought this was great and this let off a few firecrackers in your brain, just wait till that one comes out. Now, they might even talk about Carney kept referencing the middle powers,
Oh yes,
Mm,
and
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
sounded
kind
like,
of
Lord of the Rings or something.
Yes,
Yes,
Middle Earth.
yes.
Party of
Yeah.
One.
Well, yeah, yeah.
And
One
and
country
ladies-
that rule them all.
Yeah. Well, he looks
And-
like a hobbit anyway.
Yeah, he
so-
does.
he was
yeah.
he was not the one to coin the phrase, if you're not sitting at the table you might be on the menu. That's
Yeah.
a tale as old as time. And also, maybe you guys can talk about whether China has any heavy lift military capabilities to actually bring some troops across the pond. But
they do. They
Yeah.
do.
yeah,
They
And,
have a fleet of Ro-Ros. Yeah.
yeah. So
Mhm.
it's going to be
Well, we know that they already have captured a bunch of police stations in Canada.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, they also had a
So-
New York one
Mhm.
back in 2021.
Yeah,
And
So-
and there are Chinese
people are
military
going to be double
troops.
locking their doors and windows tonight. in
Yes.
Canada.
Well, say your
It's going to
prayers,
be
ladies
like
and
the,
gentlemen.
Orson Welles War of the Worlds.
Yes,
you
because
guys know that history.
yeah,
Yeah.
There's-
well, I'm not.
yeah.
I'm not guilty. I this is. I'm. I'm just a guy in Florida. That's all.
yeah, that's it. Brandon would probably know better than most that there are Chinese-owned industries and so corpse, dead bodies, and land that's owned by Chinese government, and they have Chinese troops in plain clothes there to protect their business interests
Yeah.
on the North American continent. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not outside the realm of possibilities.
And
It's
if
looking
Carney
more and
really
more like
gets his
they-
wish and
Mhm.
turns China into a proxy of I'm sorry, Canada into a proxy of China, you
Yeah.
might actually have contingents of the way that Canadians and Americans have contingents of each other's militaries.
Yeah.
This really could get ugly.
Yeah.
Well, if you
Yeah.
think of the Suffield military base, which is the largest land base in NATO, the
Yeah.
only reason the British forces were there was for balance of power,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Yep.
they're not there now. So
Yeah.
Nope.
who's
Yeah.
going to hold that balance of power?
Yeah.
It's gonna get
So,
ugly.
Wow, tale as old as time,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen. I'll pray. We'll wrap
Okay.
this up.
Okay.
Park the
Thank you.
land the plane. Thank you, Lord, that we can have this great conversation across the interwebs and with technology. And we pray for your peace in people's minds and hearts that only you can give, Lord Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Michael. And I want to thank our good friend Brandon Weichert for taking the time with us and scaring the heck out of all of us with a lot of truth. Check out his books. Check out his podcast and his radio show. You'll be enlightened. It'll be worth the journey. Believe me.
Yeah.
And so we want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and especially our guest. And thank you, Michael. Hope everyone has a wonderful evening and good night.
Good night.
God bless.